Filmmaking can be a series of contradictions. You'll often hear the phrase, the gear doesn't matter, as in, you can make a great movie with whatever tools you have. And this is absolutely true. Buying a really expensive camera doesn't guarantee nice-looking images. But at the same time, film equipment will often dictate workflow, which itself has an enormous impact on how the artist creates, what their process looks like, so you'll often see great filmmakers whose work is enormously defined by their equipment. And I would argue that a big part of understanding James Rolfe as an artist is knowing the equipment he would have used in his early career. To use a different filmmaker as an example, Kevin Smith famously opted to shoot Clerks in black and white because of the available fluorescent lighting in his convenience store, which had a greenish tint and would have most likely produced unpleasant skin tones. But in black and white, that's not a problem, so that's why Clerks looks the way it does. Conversely, the early mumblecore films were shot on MiniDV tapes, which could record for a full hour at a time, as opposed to the roughly 11 minutes you'd get on 35mm film stock. This led to scenes being shot in long takes with heavy improvisation because the runtime was more forgiving and DV tapes were incredibly cheap. And that's why mumblecore films are whatever it is they are. With that in mind, in 2002, Panasonic released the AG DVX100, a consumer camcorder with many of the features of high-end broadcast cameras, such as full manual exposure, high-quality audio preamps and inputs, and crucially, the ability to shoot 24 frames per second as opposed to 30. And because of how revolutionary this camera was for up-and-coming filmmakers, it launched a number of careers, most notably the Duplass brothers and the team behind It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who shot the first 6 seasons of their show on this camera. Which is all to say, the DVX100 allowed independent filmmakers with limited resources to play in the big leagues, so it elevated a number of famous and successful directors. And then there's James Rolfe, a successful filmmaker in terms of having an audience and being able to create films as a full-time job. But yet, he's not making feature-length narrative movies like he wanted, despite arguably being more talented with shot composition and editing than many of his contemporaries, including and especially the Duplass brothers. So what happened? Why did the DVX100 School of Filmmaking launch Mark Duplass into superstardom, acting in prestige-ish Apple TV shows with Reese Witherspoon and giving talks at South by Southwest, while James Rolfe is essentially stuck in Philadelphia, green screening himself into stock footage of Las Vegas and getting downvoted to hell for his music videos? Shot for shot, I think James is a much better filmmaker than Mark Duplass, and they had access to basically the same tools. So what happened? It's a question without a simple answer, but I have some theories. So without further ado, let's get into things. This is it. This is the big episode.
All the money.
All the money. This is the episode so big I had to use a microphone stand.
Ooh.
So that I can show you this big prop.
The prop is the camera
This
itself.
is the prop.
Beautiful.
So I was worried you'd catch on to what was happening when you first saw this.
No.
But you just thought it was camera gear.
Yeah.
We're coming here to film.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was like, oh, you got some other elaborate setup in mind. Interesting.
Do you have any feelings of pathos for this particular model of camera? Or does it just look like a standard news camera?
Yeah. I think just standard news camera, I think.
All right, well, I'm going to try and say this like Cameron in Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he's talking about the Ferrari.
Ooh.
This is, actually, there's not as many words, so it's not as fancy. This is the Panasonic DVX100A, often referred to simply as the DVX100. It is a digital video camera from early 2000s.
Okay.
It uses DV tapes, so it films onto tape. And it is the camera that launched a number of careers, including and especially Mr. James Rolfe, and other perhaps more notable filmmakers. But today I want to talk about James Rolfe. So let me, just to give my bona fides for the video, to prepare to talk about James Rolfe in any capacity.
Okay.
I actually kind of like James Rolfe, so I'm going to be kind to him in this video. Caught up on some old nerd. Watched the AVGN movie, which we will talk about at length in a different episode. But
a different episode.
This is going to be a multi-parter.
This is thorough. Okay.
So watch the movie. And then I read his autobiography, A Movie Making Nerd, and I consider myself as knowledgeable as I ever will be about James Rolfe. And I bought this camera just for this video because I have problems. But he's talked about this camera before in a number of videos. I'm going to read you the passage from his book. Here we go. Let the words waft over you. Oh, he's talking about film school.
Okay.
My big investment that year was a new digital camera, a Panasonic DVX100. It was the first of its kind to shoot 24 instead of 30 frames per second, which gave it a more film-like look. The rest of the university, professors and classmates were very dedicated to the idea of shooting actual film stock. It had to be film. I was one of the few to break the mold. I had like an hour-long version of this thing where I was going to talk about the history of film students. I don't think we have that much time, but
Fair.
essentially the group that calls themselves New Hollywood, so like George Lucas, Coppola, those guys, they're the first group of directors that all went to film school. So that's around the 70s, and that's the invention of the blockbuster. Something happens in the 90s. I'm trying to talk about the sort of last 40 years of film history in a way that is succinct, but also I'm trying to talk around some of the problematic players, but I guess there's no way to talk about what will eventually get us to people like James Rolfe without talking about what happened with independent cinema in the 90s. And so a book that really was a big deal for James Rolfe, and he's talked about it on a number of occasions. I actually did not get this for the show. I've had this for a long time. Rebel Without a Crew, the Robert Rodriguez book. And Rodriguez was, I don't know if he was the first, but he was a very prominent success story as an auteur filmmaker who made the movie literally by himself. I'm sure you're familiar enough with the...
Yeah, I know a bit of the backstory. Yeah.
James Rolfe reads this book in college, and he decides to go down that route as a filmmaker. Robert Rodriguez, Kevin Smith, and Quentin Tarantino are sort of these indie filmmaking success story icons of the 90s. Crucially, there's something connecting all three of them that's not fun to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But I have to talk about it, which is Miramax and Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is that as blockbuster films become a thing in sort of the post-Jaws era, you get things like Star Wars, there's a division between really expensive genre movies that, let's say you want to make an action movie that's like $50 or $100 million at the time, right? That's a significant investment. So you either make something that's spectacle or you get celebrities involved, right? I don't want to say his name too many times. So the producer, who will not be named, just realizes that when a movie gets Oscar nominations, people go and rent it en masse. And he also realizes that if a movie is likely to win Academy Award nominations for acting, an actor who is very famous might do the movie for less money. Think of Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. He's basically, I think he's doing that movie for scale.
Yeah.
And so if you have a movie with a movie star in it, like a bona fide celebrity like a Robin Williams, you'll make a killing at the box office. And basically that's the Miramax model. The most extreme example of that, I think, would be Pulp Fiction, where I don't think this was always public knowledge, but Pulp Fiction, basically Bruce Willis really wanted to be in this movie because he loved Reservoir Dogs. So he agreed to be in a very small part in the movie for almost no money. I think he did it for scale. And because Bruce Willis is in the movie at all, and keep in mind, they haven't started shooting. They've planned that Bruce Willis is going to be in it.
Yeah.
They sell the international rights to the movie for $8 million.
Whoa.
For a movie that doesn't exist yet.
Wow.
Because Bruce Willis is going to be in it.
That's some star power. Wow.
So it doesn't matter what they film.
Yeah.
If Bruce Willis is in this movie in any capacity, like if they finish the movie, they get $1 million profit.
That's insane.
So that's kind of the power of the Miramax model. And then, of course, Pulp Fiction comes out and it earns quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a very effective model. And I don't want to say too many kind things about Miramax because they are awful, awful, monstrous, evil people. You know, if you're living in middle America, there's this kind of dream that, hey, like perhaps anyone could become a film director. And especially with these sort of icons of celebrity directors and auteurs, you got a lot of people enrolling in film school. And I think this might be in Rodriguez's book, but he talks about how when he was in film school, there was some stat going around that there were more people in film school than law school.
Wow.
So times were changing. Everyone wanted to be a director and a filmmaker. Also around this time, crucially, is digital video is getting better. Well, digital video starts to exist, first of all, but video as we know it starts to improve because there used to be a very big difference between shooting on film stock and shooting on video. As James Rolfe mentions in his book, this camera comes out and it shoots 24 frames a second, progressive, like 24 clean frames a second. So you've seen interlacing. How would you describe the affect of watching interlacing?
Oh God, I remember one of my friends had like they were adjusting like their TV settings, and it was like 480p, 480i, 720p, and then there was 1080p, 1080i, and it was like, oh, what are all these like I's and P's? And then my friend was like, oh, you never want I's, really. Yeah. You always want progressive. And I didn't know what the phenomenon was like. And like one of the examples of like when I'd actually like seen interlacing in effect, I think there was like a clip of End of Evangelion that like someone uploaded at one time or something, and you could see like the frame blending and everything. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like that's disorienting. There's like this kind of like ghosting effect where you obviously like interlace, like each frame is like loaded in with the next halfway kind of, and that gives that like weird smear effect and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interlacing in the modern era, awful. Like looks so bad.
Yeah.
People go to great lengths to get rid of it. Sometimes you can't. Anime is a classic example where some shows are more complicated than others. I'm going to say something that might make all of us uncomfortable.
Ooh.
On a CRT television, interlacing is the best thing ever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because it is very efficient.
I think I know some of the technical details behind it in like an abstract way, but I'm sure you can explain it or.
I mean, I can attempt it. It's,
Okay.
Anytime I look up interlacing, I know less than I did last time.
Okay.
I just know I've had to de-interlace a lot of clips at work. But essentially, a CRT television, there is no point, there's no instant in time when the whole screen is illuminated at once. So it's drawing, you can watch like hyper slow motion videos of this or like super slow motion.
Yeah.
It's actually like with a laser, like drawing each line, like pixel
Right.
by pixel.
Yeah.
If you look away from a CRT, it'll like that appear to flicker. So at any given moment, it's just drawing a new line.
Yeah.
And by the time it finishes drawing the image, half the image is already faded because the light fades.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that works. That's getting too advanced. So if you watch like a 60i interlaced image on a CRT television, you'd never notice it because the TV is already doing that no matter what to draw an image. Anyway, DVX100, there's some wild math going on here because DV tape shoots 60i. It's 30 physical frames a second divided into two. So each 60 times a second, there's an interlaced frame. So what really confuses me about DV tape, and I hate to say this because I really am just raising more questions that I cannot answer, but DV tape is digital information stored on an analog format. It's tape, but with numbers on it.
Okay.
So I wonder why does there have to be a frame rate to DV video? Why can't you just store like documents or whatever? I don't know. But this camera records 24 progressive frames inside a container of 60i.
Ooh.
So there's 30 interlacing frames a second. So there's oh boy. So
math.
so there's like 30 half frames, right? So there's 60 interlaced frames, and they found a way to put 24p inside 60i. And the math is wild. I've looked it up so many times. I do not understand it.
God.
It's like this weird equation where they find a way to put the same frame in twice so that the interlace catches it. And then after 4 frames of that, there's like 2 garbage frames they throw away.
Wow.
Every time I look at it, I get increasingly upset. I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about film tech. It gets worse every time I look it up. All you need to know is that this is the first consumer affordable digital video camera that shoots 24 frames. Yeah. And what that does, and I'm about to do this big moment that I've wanted to reveal for a while, is that if you're a film person, like let's say you're in film school, film cameras are awful. Like they are very hard to use. Some of them you have to like hold your hand on the button to like keep filming.
Oh god.
So you can't even step away from the camera. You have to like jam it. Crucially, you cannot see what you're actually filming. You can look in the viewfinder, but that's not how it's going to look later. Yeah. You don't have, there's no real time WYSIWYG or whatever. Enormously bulky cameras and loud. And video had always been more convenient for a number of reasons, but video looks bad. So here the idea is video is getting one step closer to film, and it does something that is going to rock your world. Are you ready?
Okay.
It's something, I'm clicking by accident.
Whoa, it's rocking my world.
You're rocking
what is
your
this
world.
Background.
All right, are you ready?
Okay.
This is what the DVX offered to filmmakers. Are you ready?
Okay.
Wait for it.
Oh.
You see how that could create a James Rolfe?
Yeah.
I need people to know there was no way to film yourself. Like when we talk about Robert Rodriguez, one-man army making a film, he still had to have actors. He couldn't film himself.
Yeah.
Because, it's not quite the King Kong thing, but it's like someone has to be operating the camera. With this, you can be Robert Rodriguez and the cast. You can film yourself truly and have it look good, have it look like film.
Yeah.
Within reason. Obviously, it's not a miracle worker, but that's what the DVX does. It allows filmmakers to enjoy the benefits of video. And on the note of video, James Rolfe says something really, I don't want to say oddly insightful, because I think James Rolfe is a smart guy, but he says something that's like really mind-blowing. Let me find it. When he was in film school, video, as opposed to film, video was not great in quality, but it was only going to improve. Right. So he figured if I if I really hitch my wagon, I don't know if that's the analogy. If I really hitch my wagon to this video thing, eventually that's going to catch up. Yeah. And those skills might be more useful in the future than 35 millimeter film operation.
Right.
And boy, was he ever correct.
Yeah.
Because there's a handful of filmmakers who shoot on 35 millimeter these days. Everything is on video. Yeah. And functionally, like even the DVX100, the red and the Alexa are not that much different from this relative to using a 35 millimeter camera, which the skill set's just completely different. I mean, checking the gate, these are all like things that don't matter anymore. And so the reason that I want to make this extremely weird cross section of James Rolfe and DVX100 is that I want to talk about James Rolfe in comparison to his contemporaries, because I think people talk about him a lot relative to other online content creators. But thinking of James Rolfe as a filmmaker, I think there's two filmmakers you can compare James Rolfe to in terms of his place in the market, right?
Okay.
They're both not filmmakers I like, so the comparison's going to sound mean, but I promise these are like interesting comparisons in terms of figuring out why James is the way he is, right? In terms of his success. Yeah. One is Mark Duplass, and the puffy chair was shot on the DVX100. So there's a comparison there, and why are they different people? Why is Mark Duplass a multimillionaire who's in big Hollywood movies? Why is James Rolfe stuck in Philadelphia, having made one film that everyone hates?
Yeah.
I know it sounds like I'm narrativizing, but the film, I think it's safe to say the AVGN movie's not well liked by the mass public. The other person to compare James Rolfe to, and I don't mean this as an insult, Doug Walker.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they kind of occupy the same space. I mean, AVGN created the genre that Doug Walker is in.
Right.
But their careers have sort of been comparable over the years. They've had this like fake feud, and there's some crossover episodes. The thing with Doug Walker, and this is almost so obvious, I feel like I shouldn't even say it, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
Doug Walker is a professional video guy. His job is making internet videos. And for some reason, for 20 years strong, 20 whole years, he has not bothered to learn how to frame a shot.
Good Lord.
Like, he'll film, like, there's moments in, like, The Wall, like his review of The Wall.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I want to be clear, like, he gets paid to do this. This is his job. He'll have, like, a medium shot where, like, his forehead's cut off.
Oh, God.
I'm like, Doug, like, just pay I think they call them shooters in videography. Just pay a shooter, like, $200 to record, like, the quality of his videos in every sense of the word, like the white balance is off in his stuff. Like the framing is off. It's really hard to watch. And you're like, dude, like this is your job. And I think the generation after us, so like Zoomers and like Gen Alpha, I think they're all pretty well aware of like the tools of content creation. You get a ring light, you frame up a shot nicely. Yeah. I think that's a skill set that just like comes with the territory of being that age. And then people of Doug Walker and AVGN's sort of era, you really had to go to film school. And that's the big difference between them, right? Like you watch James Rolfe stuff. I mean, have you seen like the Bugs Bunny one where he like fights Bugs Bunny? Yeah. It's really well shot. Yeah. Like the economy of images and like the way it cuts between them. I'm impressed, honestly. Like every time I look at that, I'm like, this is so cool. Shooting action is hard. I've tried. It has not gone well for me. Shooting dialogue's a lot easier. But James Rolfe, like you could tell he went to film school. The shots are framed nicely. But let's compare him to Mark Duplass. And I want to get at my big thesis, why James Rolfe has not enjoyed the success of Mark Duplass. I'm curious where you think I'm going to go with this.
Judging on how I've heard you describe and your general contempt for mumblecore, I would assume it has to do maybe with how I think the Duplass brothers maybe have like a bit more economic leverage, maybe better class status, but they kind of... they sort of cosplay lower class or something, so to speak. And
interesting.
And maybe that the concern is like, the subject matter is, I think in some of the stuff you've talked about, or maybe one of your reviews of his stuff, it's like, like these are just like bored rich people like making movies about nothing. And that's why, there's nothing relatable to them or something. But I'm speaking on how I think you had already previously commented, but otherwise I think I'm in the dark maybe.
You are so close, it's scary.
Okay.
Everything you said is correct.
Gotcha.
And it does have to do with money.
Okay.
The Duplass brothers are inspired by filmmakers who are just drama and dialogue. And the biggest one that influenced the Duplass brothers, it's not my favorite name to say out loud, but it is a fact. The Duplass brothers are making new Woody Allen movies, essentially.
Okay.
And those movies are very cheap to make because you just point a camera at an actor who's talking.
Yeah.
Again, not to talk about Woody Allen too much because that guy sucks as a human being, and is terrible and gross. He has openly said in many interviews that he doesn't really care what the camera's doing.
Wow.
And the Duplass brothers are like the next version of that, or they're that taken to its absolute extreme.
Yeah.
Like mumblecore movies, especially the early ones, they look so bad.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of all of this, and the reason I'm comparing Rolfe and the Duplass brothers, Puffy Chair looks awful. And the average Angry Video Game Nerd episode is shot so much better.
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole like Bugs Bunny sequence again, or there's another one like the Addams Family when he's got the train in the Fester's Quest. Yeah. I love that sequence. Any shot from that sequence looks better than whatever the best shot in Puffy Chair would be. Like Puffy Chair looks so bad.
Wow.
And I'm getting like really heated. It just, and it makes you wonder, how did two filmmakers, you know, the Duplass brothers, how do they reach such success really without caring about anything? Story, dialogue, like plot, pathos, theme, cinematography. And so the thing is, a mumblecore movie is all about dialogue. You can shoot a mumblecore movie for $0. Essentially what we're filming now could be a mumblecore movie, right?
Yeah.
And what James Rolfe is inspired by is the Universal monster films and the movies he grew up with, which was this like Reagan era America adventure comedy, sort of high concept movies. Very expensive to make, and often, like in the case of Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, which I think are probably two of his favorite movies, he certainly references them enough. Those cast sitcom actors because like genre dialogue is very hard to deliver.
Yeah.
So if you find someone who's worked in sitcoms, they can say anything and make it sound passable, right?
Oh, yeah.
Michael J. Fox, like that's some of the hardest acting in Back to the Future because the lines aren't real like dialogue. Like, it's not like a thing another human would say to a person. It's like, we're sending you back to the future. I know it's Christopher Lloyd, but that's not a thing a human would ever say, like pointing off into nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult kind of acting. And to make a movie like Ghostbusters, let's say, you really need $50 million at your disposal to do something like that.
Yeah.
These are, you know, the kind of films that influenced James Rolfe. I went through, he's got his like top 50 movies.
Yeah.
He's said it a number of times.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's only 3 movies on that list that are like film school classics. The rest are like Universal monster movies or like 80s action adventure movies. The vast majority are movies that you'd need a minimum of $20 million to make. And so the tragedy of James Rolfe is that the kind of movies he wants to make are not budget friendly.
Yeah.
And they're not mumblecore. I don't think James would know how to make a mumblecore movie. And I don't mean that so much as an insult, but rather, you know, a Duplass brother. I know I keep coming back to them, but these are guys who maybe lived near a major city that had an art scene.
Yeah.
They could go to improv classes. They would know stand-up comedians. That's sort of the situation I'm in, right? Like we live near Toronto. We can find the most incredible actors who just haven't got their break yet, right? James lives in the middle of nowhere, essentially. I mean, eventually, well, yeah, New Jersey is where he spends a lot of time growing up. It's not like there's a huge stand-up comedy scene, and he didn't go to a college that, well, they might have had an improv club, but he doesn't seem to have gone to improv club. He has a passage in his book about going to acting class. It's pretty brief, but he's certainly not as affected by that in terms of like, he goes to acting class and he's like, oh, I'm going to write a sort of Tennessee Williams style movie, right? His favorite movies, even by the time he finishes film school, are Back to the Future, Universal monster movies. Yeah. And when the time comes to make his feature, the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, there's so... I like James Rolfe. I'm rooting for him. There's so many times in his book where he talks about the making of that movie, and I go, James, don't do it. Like, so many classic mistakes. A big one that everyone mentions, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but he went to Hollywood to shoot the Angry Video Game Nerd movie. Shooting in LA is wildly expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes for a cool book because some of the stuff he mentions is kind of surprising. He talks about the geography of LA and how filming in certain spots, like you have to compare property value versus like the extra union fees of making people drive a certain distance.
Right.
Very interesting. But a lot of the criticism toward James Rolfe online is unfair. But the thing people say that is basically correct is that if he had taken the Kickstarter money, which ended up being $200,000 after taxes, if he had just gotten his buddies together in Philly and made that movie, it would have gone really far. Because it's sort of like the Matt Johnson model, a Toronto filmmaker. His whole budget just goes towards salary. So he gets all his friends and he takes the budget and divides it up by, okay, well, we can just hang out for 6 years. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, let's say you and I had $200,000. We could just hang out for 6 years and make a movie.
Yeah.
But he went to LA and $200,000 already doesn't go far in LA. He's also not making a mumblecore movie. No. He's making something with effects and costumes and locations and desert shots and the action sequences and a bunch of actors who are not his friends, right? Like just people, like professional working actors.
Yeah.
a lot of things happen in the production of that movie that you're like, James, why did you? This is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's very much still trying to make this sort of big Hollywood movie. When they premiere the AVGN movie, they premiere it at, I don't know if it's the Egyptian or the Chinese theater, but like one of the big ones in LA.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
They have to pay a lot of money. It's like, this is the theater where Star Wars premiered, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, even doing that, like I get why that's meaningful to James Rolfe. That's like a big moment for him. Like as a Spielberg enthusiast kid, finally getting to have your movie there. Yeah. But for the average angry video game nerd fan, they don't care what that, like who cares? Like just rent out a church or whatever. Right? Yeah. Like, so there's so many little moments like that on the way.
I was just going to say, like, it seems based on how you're describing and contrasting, like, especially the Duplass brothers, you know, there's this great juxtaposition. It's like, oh, you know, James Rolfe has these ideas for like big grand scale, you know, big budget blockbusters and very like heavy genre oriented things. And for him, you know, maybe because he's in Philly or whatever, as you say, and he's, you know, doesn't have the greatest like film community and everything and all the resources, maybe in a way like part of that love might come from like an escapism from, and I don't mean to like psychoanalyze him, but just like circumstantially, like he has all these like big fantastical ideas, but he's compromised by like the lack of resources at his disposal, where it seems like the Duplass brothers have the opposite problem, where they have like no ambition, but they have all of the like easily accessible resources. So it's like, oh, well, you know, we're just gonna like keep it low key and it's like whatever, man. And this is like, you know, the new John Cassavetes, like cinema verite, almost like neo realism and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just like such a wild contrast.
It is, yeah. And I think so much of why people like mumblecore, maybe this is me being ungenerous, but I think a big appeal of mumblecore is the success story of it all. You hear about Mark Duplass, and certainly in film school, I knew a number of people who were like, this is so exciting.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, I've never heard like the people in question who are like celebrating the Mark Duplass success story.
Okay.
These aren't people who I think actually like his movies.
Wow.
It's like the legend superseded. And I think the same would be true of like James Rolfe with like Robert Rodriguez, right? Is that I don't think James Rolfe likes mariachi all that much.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's his favorite movie. I think he much prefers what Kevin Smith and Tarantino would be doing. But there is this appeal to like the success story of it, right? You know, if we think of James Rolfe as someone who wanted to make feature films and for one reason or another is not doing that full time anymore because the YouTube stuff has gotten in the way, so to speak. Yeah. He's kind of in this weird middle ground because he's not quite a content creator. I don't think that's his dream, is to do brand deals. Yeah. When he does those like Express VPN ads, you can tell he doesn't like it. Something's off about it.
I haven't seen those.
Oh, man.
Are they part of his videos or are they like separate ads?
So for the past like couple of years, every video opens with like a full on Express VPN. Come subscribe.
I may have like instinctively skipped them anyway. So fair enough.
They're hard to watch. Okay. I'll be honest with you. It feels like he doesn't want to do them. And a lot's been made of how the Cinemassacre channel has been not taken over, but it's being managed by a multi-channel company. Do you know about this at all?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. I won't go into it too much, but it's a mess. And he's putting less work into the content in the sense that he's not editing or even writing all the videos anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It ended up leading to this weird like plagiarism scandal where someone at the network that was running the channel got some scripts that were just taken from like online reviews of movies. Whoa. It actually was part of H-Bomber Guy's plagiarism video.
Whoa.
So that's how bad it got, is that it's part of that video.
Yeah, that's a big scandal.
And I think everyone watching knows like this isn't James's fault. He's trying to get someone to manage his channel for him so he can have time to raise his children and have a family, and just all this nonsense is happening. All of which to say, James Rolfe isn't quite a content creator as we know it today. Yeah. And the film thing doesn't quite seem to have worked out for him. And really where that gets weird is that there's a really infamous video where he's showing his filmmaking setup. Do you know about this?
No.
I won't go into it too much, but it's like the big video for people who hate James Rolfe. It is like video you go to go, yes, this is their Citizen Kane of I hate James Rolfe. Right?
Wow. Okay.
And I think people are being unfair, but essentially what happens in this video is he shows his camera setup in the modern day where everything's being run by this other channel. It's his home filming setup, and it's very odd because it's not like when we think of a content creator, it's like ring light, maybe some LED panels on the ceiling, and you're done. Get a shotgun mic and like a lav. Yeah. It's not that. It's something weirder, and it's something I'm more patient toward because I worked for a lot of people who are like this. I literally worked for people who were graduates of film school in 2001, 2002. So it's people who had that older like film mentality, but were trying to apply it to a new video world.
Oh, okay.
And so instead of a bunch of LED like ring lights around the room, right, which is what someone might do today, or what we have here, which is these like clamp lights with LED bulbs in them, he has like actual film lights, like RE1K's style. I think it's still an LED, but it's like the style of an RE1K.
Wow.
But it's on like one of those metal stands. I'm pointing at stuff that's off camera. I'm so sorry, everyone. It's on one of these stands, which is not quite a C stand, right? It's sort of like just a plastic metal-y stand. It's wire connected to the ceiling.
Oh.
And it's not really clear why. He says he does that to save floor space. But so there's just this like light hanging from the ceiling, but it's not like the kind of light that you could comfortably hang from the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's like a film light that he put on the ceiling.
Yeah. What in the world?
It's really odd. He shows off his microphone setup.
Yeah.
But it's hanging from the ceiling, and the wire is the XLR cable is like wired to the ceiling in such a way that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, frankly. And apparently he says in the video, yeah, our setup, there's a lot of like RF interference. There's this loud buzz that I have to like denoise the video to get rid of. And I'm like, James, this is your permanent setup.
Jesus. Yeah.
I know it's hard to get rid of electrical noise in audio, like in your setup. That's hard to do. People get paid lots of money to figure that out. It's engineering, truly. But it's in this video, and again, I'm saying this as someone who's on James's team. He's someone living in the content creator era whose skill set is not content creation. It's filmmaking. He'd be really great at filming someone else in front of the camera, but the fact that he has to record it himself, I think his skill set was great in 2004 because no one was at his level. He was head and shoulders above the competition.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's, you watch him and you compare it to like, well, even saying Casey Neistat's a bit outdated. Like Emma Chamberlain, I don't know, like someone like that. People who are able to do it efficiently, right? And I hate to say the word efficient because that's not really a film word. That's like a pipeline word.
Yeah.
But that is the world we live in.
Yeah.
So that's fun. So I guess for me, really my thesis is that the key to understanding James Rolfe is the DVX100. It's this precise moment in history where video and film were colliding at 100 miles an hour. And I think really what's helpful to understanding him is just knowing that film school has all these different generations. And I think, going backwards from when we went to film school, before us, there was the immediate DSLR revolution where people were able to go from something like this, which is the correct frame rate, to big sensor, shallow depth of field, which was itself a huge move. I mean, you see like some of those 5D shots where like it's an eyeball and like the eyelashes are out of focus. You're like, wow, this looks like Hollywood. Before that, there was a whole group of film students who saw Lord of the Rings and were like, I want to go to film school. And James Rolfe is in this weird era where I don't think his skills really translate to now. And he's kind of just like that guy. Is it Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill?
Yeah.
I think he's just doomed to keep making these little videos for YouTube and keep dreaming about making features. But I don't think... I don't know. I just can't help but wonder, like, if he had just gone to like improv club in college, maybe he'd be better equipped to make a $5,000 feature film, right? But he just keeps trying to make his version of Ghostbusters, and we'll talk about the movie in a different episode. Again, I'm on James's side, but that movie's rough. And I think even if he had more money, I still think there's a lot of issues with it. The issues go well beyond budget. I think there's a lot of script problems, but he's just the right man in the right place at the wrong time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, how does that make you feel?
Yeah. I think in order to get to, say, to those big blockbusters, you got to work your way up, I think, naturally, even still, like be realistic about what you can do. Like El Mariachi is like lightning in a bottle kind of thing. Like that's those kind of success stories are like miraculous, I think. So maybe it takes like a bit of like tempering or just like trying to shift gears and maybe work in a different, like more modest comfort zone as far as like budget and ambition of what kind of story he wants to tell. But yeah, I don't know, like there's certainly a passion there, but like, yeah, maybe he needs to like sort of readjust for scale and maybe try like smaller projects to like cultivate up to like a, something bigger. But, he's got all these other things going on in his life. He's got to pay the bills.
I love what you're saying about like being realistic about the limitations and like, what are the steps to get where, let's say you want to make a general mass appeal 80s movie. Let's say you want to make Ghostbusters. there's a few steps along the way. Even the guy who did the most recent Ghostbusters, in addition to being a Nepo baby, he made Juno, which is a realistic movie to shoot.
Yeah,
you can shoot Juno for no money. He didn't, but like you could, right?
You could. Yeah.
And like something that's also tragic is like James Rolfe loves horror movies. Why didn't he make a horror movie? Like people will watch horror movies that don't have celebrities in them. Yeah. It's a great way to break into the industry. I think of Guillermo del Toro sort of operates in that space. The Shazam guy, whose name I'm forgetting, but
oh God. Oh, it's escaping me too.
Yeah. He made that like Lights Out movie or whatever it was.
Oh yeah. That person who I don't remember their name. Yeah. But I gotcha.
All of which to say you can make like a $0 horror film and people will see it. Yeah. Like why didn't James do that? Like people will watch horror movies.
I was going to say like, honest to God, like that is kind of, to my understanding, like horror is the genre that like the bar could be insanely low, but like consumers, especially, they're like this movie could have like a 2% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's like, this is the current horror movie that's in theaters now. And a lot of people will fucking just go out and see it, no matter the quality. And they'll be like, oh, I didn't get spooked, or I did get spooked, and blah, blah, blah. And it always like makes bank. So like, I feel like that's kind of an easy route to go.
Yeah, it's a great way into the industry. If I was more interested in horror, maybe I'd try doing that to get films out there, but I'm really not that interested in it. Yeah. I'll stop saying the word tragedy because I think I've said that a lot, but James Rolfe is so talented. And there's a few moments in his book that had me cackling. He talks about like some of the creatures that I think him and Mike Matei made in college.
Oh, okay.
And one of them was, it's like he doesn't show it in the book, but he just describes it. He says it's like a smiley face called Fonny, Fonny. And it's just this giant orb, like a planet-sized orb hanging above the earth that says, that's Fonny. But it says it's so loud that the earth shakes. So he goes, that's Fonny. That's the whole character.
Incredible.
I don't know why it makes me laugh so hard. But that's, but you can see how that's like of a kinship with like shit pickle, right? Like it's all kind of, it's just like, I don't know why that's Fonny thing makes me laugh, but
yeah,
it does.
It's like this incredibly, like, as much as people like to kind of label like, oh, something, this is like a highbrow comedy or a lowbrow comedy. Like, I think really it comes down to like, there are quote unquote highbrow or maybe just labeled as like good comedies that like, you know, they do scatological humor, but it's all about how clever you are about it. Yeah. And it's like, you know, with, you know, shit pickle and like this, that's Fonny thing. Like, it's so dumb. It circles around to being like very like insightful. Like, who comes up with this just like absurd, inane thing, but also feels like very iconic and like, you know, it's dumb, but it's also like succinct and like direct enough that, hey, it works.
Yeah. And it's silliness, right? Yeah. I think it feels vulnerable to be silly because, as you say, it's not highbrow, right? Yeah. And people like think you're dumb for doing it. To put that out there into the world, I mean, it's just such an amazing thing. So I wish he put more stuff like that in his videos, but I'm not sure how much you know about like these music videos he keeps trying to do.
No, I don't think so.
Oh man, that's like 5 other videes. He started a band, and it's trying to be a little bit like you know how Stephen King's in a band with Matt Groening. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, maybe you don't.
Wow, I feel like that would be setting off some like radars. Like, holy shit! Like Matt Groening and Stephen King are in a band.
Oh, it's like a bunch of writers from the Northeast are in a band together.
Wow.
But like right off the bat, you're like, I don't care how bad they are. Like, I need to listen to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
James Rolfe like teamed up with a bunch of guys from this like network. It's bad music. It's so bad. Okay. Anyway, so it's trying to be kind of like that. Like, oh, isn't it cute? This famous person's in a band. It's just not that. Anyway, so there's a lot going on with AVGN that even us as people who are pretty online don't always know about. The rabbit hole runs deep. The point of this video is like, James Rolfe is this weird intersection of a bunch of competing interests that I don't think, I think his interests certainly outpaces his budget. But what he's really good at and what he wants to be are very different. And something deeply human about that and deeply sad about that is perhaps we all want to be things that we're not. Anyway, that's the James Rolfe story.
That's a Christopher Nolan story too.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. There's 10 more videos to make on this subject, but that's James Rolfe and the DVX100.
Beautiful. A long saga ahead for the angriest video game nerd who's already got such a legacy of films and works, as it were, online, and his skits and everything.
Yeah, I hope he makes some more movies. I'd like to see him put that effort in, but the future's now looking super bright. But I stay optimistic. I'm optimistic.
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, that's today's episode. Bye, everyone. On that sad note, bye, everyone.
Bye.